The rumble of engines shattered the peace of a sleepy farm as a gang of bikers roared up the dirt driveway, their laughter loud and taunting. They weren't just passing through. They had their eyes on the farmer's land, his livelihood, and maybe even his pride. To them, he was an easy target, a quiet man living a solitary life in the countryside. But what they didn't know was that this farmer wasn't just any man. Before he traded rifles for a plow, he was one of the best snipers in the military, trained to see danger coming from miles away. The gang underestimated him, and they were about to learn the hard way that some battles aren't won by numbers or noise. As tensions escalated, the farmer stood his ground, calm and calculating, as the echoes of his past crept into the present. What happens next might just turn the tables. The farmer, Jack, had spent years blending into the quiet rhythm of rural life. His neighbors knew him as a man of few words, tending his crops and minding his own business. What they didn't know was the life he had left behind. The missions he couldn't talk about, the decisions that haunted his nights. Jack didn't miss the chaos, but he carried its lessons with him, always prepared for trouble, even in the most peaceful places. The bikers, led by a cocky young man named Trey, were confident they'd met another pushover. They strutted around the property, tossing insults and making vague threats about what might happen if Jack didn't cooperate. But as they spread out across the yard, Jack's sharp eyes quietly assessed every detail. Their movements, their positions, and the weapons they carried. The tension hung heavy in the air. Jack stayed calm, watching, waiting, like a predator sizing up its prey. Trey lit a cigarette, pacing near Jack's porch, while the others rummaged around, kicking tools and knocking over a few barrels. It was clear they were trying to provoke him, testing how far they could push before he snapped. Jack, however, remained composed, leaning casually against the doorframe with an unreadable expression. The only giveaway that he was calculating his next move was the subtle way his hand brushed against his side, an old habit, as though he were still armed. Meanwhile, one of the bikers, a wiry guy named Luke, wandered too close to Jack's workshop. Inside were more than just farming tools. Jack had repurposed old gear into makeshift defenses, just in case. He glanced toward the door, his heart rate steady as he calculated whether Luke would take it a step too far. Tree, oblivious to the simmering tension, grinned. "You gonna stand there all day, old man? Or are you finally gonna play ball?" Jack met his gaze, unblinking. His silence wasn't fear, it was control. Every second that passed only tightened the coil of suspense. Jack took a step off the porch, his boots crunching softly against the gravel. The sound cut through the biker's chatter like a warning. He didn't raise his voice or make any sudden moves. But something about the way he stood, steady and unyielding, made a few of them exchange uneasy glances. Trey, however, wasn't fazed. If anything, he saw it as a challenge. Finally, Trey smirked, flicking his cigarette to the ground. "Guess the old dog has some fight in him after all." Jack's eyes flicked to the horizon, gauging the fading light. He knew every inch of his land and how the shadows would soon work in his favor. Meanwhile, Luke emerged from the workshop, holding one of Jack's handmade tools, a rugged contraption with sharp edges. "What's this?" Luke jeered, tossing it between his hands. Jack didn't answer. His focus was shifting now, every detail locking into place. He noticed how one biker adjusted his grip on a chain. Another kept his hand near a jacket pocket. They weren't just bullies. They were ready for things to escalate, but so was Jack. The air was electric, every second stretching into an eternity. Jack's calm voice finally broke the silence. "You boys have no idea what you've walked into." The words hung heavy, a quiet promise of what was coming. The bikers froze for a moment, Tree's smirk faltering as he tried to read Jack's tone. Was it a bluff, or something more? Before anyone could respond, the faint hum of an approaching vehicle drifted through the still air. A dusty old truck rolled up the driveway, its headlights cutting through the twilight. A man stepped out, a tall, grizzled figure with a sharp gaze that matched Jack's. "Everything all right here, Jack?" The newcomer asked casually, but his eyes scanned the scene with practiced precision. The biker stiffened. Trey's bravado wavered, but he quickly masked it. "This a friend of yours?" he asked, forcing a grin. Jack didn't answer directly. "You remember Carter, don't you?" he said, almost as if addressing an old acquaintance, but Trey didn't recognize the name, and that made him nervous. Carter's calm demeanor mirrored Jack's, and it was clear these two men shared a history, a dangerous one. The stakes shifted. The bikers weren't just dealing with one man anymore. They were now facing something far more unpredictable. Trey tried to regain control. Two old men aren't gonna change a thing, he sneered, but his voice lacked conviction. Jack's reply was steady, almost cold. You should've thought this through, son. The words carried weight, leaving the bikers visibly unsettled. The tension climbed higher, and the night seemed to close in, promising that whatever came next wouldn't be what they expected. The bikers shifted uneasily as the quiet between Jack and Carter stretched on. It was Trey who finally broke the silence, signaling to his crew. Enough of this, he barked. Take what we came for and let's move. But before anyone could make a move, Jack raised a hand. Not in surrender, but as a signal. From the shadows of the tree line, faint movements emerged. One by one, figures stepped into view, camouflaged and armed with precision. It wasn't just Jack and Carter standing against the bikers, it was a group of Jack's old comrades. Veterans who had built quiet lives nearby but never strayed far from one another. The bikers froze, realizing too late that they were outmatched. Trey's confidence shattered as he took in the quiet determination of the men surrounding them. Jack's voice cut through the tension. This isn't a fight you can win. Walk away now, and you'll leave in one piece. Trey hesitated, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. He lunged forward, but before he could get far, Carter stepped in, disarming him with ease. The rest of the bikers dropped their weapons, realizing the futility of resistance. As they were escorted off the property, Trey shot Jack a final, furious look. This isn't over, he growled. Jack remained silent, watching until the roar of their engines faded into the distance. As the night settled, Carter chuckled softly. Think they'll come back? Jack shook his head. They won't be that foolish. But as he turned back to his porch, a small, unnoticed mark on the ground caught his eye, something left behind by the bikers. It wasn't over after all, but Jack simply smiled. He was always ready for the next move. As the quiet of the night returned, Jack and Carter sat on the porch, the stars above casting a calm glow over the farm. The air was thick with unspoken words, but neither man felt the need to say much. Jack glanced at the mark left behind, a small patch of oil where the bikers had parked. It wasn't a threat, just a reminder of the day's events. They'll think twice before trying something like this again, Carter said with a smirk. Jack nodded, his mind already shifting back to the simple life he built. He had left the chaos behind years ago, but today was a reminder that his skills weren't wasted. They were just waiting for the right time. As Carter drove off, Jack lingered, his gaze sweeping over the land he worked so hard to protect. For now, the farm was safe, and that was enough.